Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to another random review. Today we're going to Poland in 1984 for Sexmission. This is a Vinegar Syndrome release, and a friend of the channel, Chris Mohan, asked had I ordered Sexmission, and I said no because I thought it was a Vinegar Syndrome, one of their more sleazy films, but this is a perfect example of not judging the book by its cover, because this is a Polish film from 1984 and it's absolutely fantastic. It's a wonderful satire. There's the poster, which is probably better artwork than the slipcover, which isn't the best artwork in the world, let's be honest. So this is directed by Juliusz Mikulski. Again, apologies for pronunciations. Born in 1955. At one point, either the golden child or enfant terrible of the Polish film scene in the 70s and 80s. Starring Olgierd Lukasiewicz and the wonderful Jerzy Stur. I mean, Jerzy Stur, both of these actors were in Decalogue. Jerzy Stur was the star of Szysłowski's Camera Buff. He was also in The Scar. There's kind of lots of familiar faces from Polish cinema. So this film is set in 1991, so far in the future, in 1991, and it's about two men who are volunteering to be hibernated for 3 years as part of an experiment. The professor who's come up with this looks a lot like Dr. Strangelove. He's even got the fake hand. They've already performed this on Coco the Chimp. The film opens with a press conference announcing what they're going to do. But unfortunately, the two men wake up in 2044 in very Woody Allen Sleeper style. I mean, there's nods to Sleeper, Bugsy Malone, Logan's Run, Dr. Strangelove. And they find that there's been a world war. All the men have been wiped out, so they're the only two men left. The world is ruled by women. It's very Two Ronnies, The Worm Has Turned, for UK viewers. Not sure whether Two Ronnies played internationally or not, but they should. So obviously this is a bit of an adjustment. And they soon learn that the women are run by somebody called the Excellency, even though when we find out the Excellency's origin story, it kind of turns the whole thing on its head, but that's for later in the film. And they are studied by the Archeo group. So the women are kind of split into two. There's the Archeo group and the Genetics group. And they pretty much sound like their names. The Genetics are obviously kind of keep order, and they have kind of the guards, whereas the Archeo are, studying and doing the science bit. There's wonderful stuff as kind of history is somewhat different as far as all the inventions and all the people like Einstein and Copernicus. They were women, according to the state. I mean, obviously this was made under the communist rule in Poland, very much like the Czech Pohádky films, the fairy tale fantasy films, this being a science fiction film, but the filmmakers are obviously putting in messages about the communist rule, so things like changing history, and they change the story about Adam and Eve, as far as it was Adam that bit the apple that led to the fall of humanity, or whatever that fairy tale says. It was Cain killed Abel, who was his sister, not his brother. So there's lots of fun gags about that. There's obviously gags about cigarettes and alcohol. Obviously sex is now, it's all reproductions done by having test tube babies, so there's no need for men. Men were all wiped out because the professor invented the M bomb, which was supposed to stop some of the males' more annoying behaviours, but actually wiped them all out completely. And we're now, considering it's 40 years since the film was made, it's fairly timely that Vinegar Syndrome have decided to release this in Blu-ray. It fits in with the Piotr Sulkin films that Radiance have released, strangely enough featuring Jersey Star as well. We see some mutated animals, or stuffed mutated animals, which are hilarious by themselves. They have their own kind of holy tree that only has 2 apples left. The guards in the facility move about on roller skates, which is a nice touch. I mean, it's a big budget production, or as far as big budget productions went in the 80s Polish cinema. And again, through production design, they do build a believable world, the same way those Piotr Sulkin films did. And when the women get old, they pretty much go to a prison, or an old age asylum, as it's called. It's full of wonderful ideas. Obviously, Star is his usual everyman. His character only really volunteered because of money and to essentially get away from his wife and kid. Whereas he plays Max, whereas Albert, played by Olgard Lukowicz, which isn't his name, he's a party member and he's doing it for the good of the party, the good of the nation, as an experiment, because it's touted as we'll be able to put people with diseases in hibernation and so we can find a cure. And he's much more scientific, whereas Jersey Star is kind of the lowest common denominator and obviously surrounded by lots of women. There is lots of female nudity in the film, but it's never sexualised or anything like that, because it's a place full of women, so they do tend to take their clothes off a lot for some reason. It is full of wonderful moments of comedy. It's full of wonderful little digs at the communist regime at the time, even though it's talking about the women-only totalitarian authority in the film. Because they keep misbehaving and not doing what they're told, they're threatened with feminisation and being turned into women. So you could say it's kind of pertinent for the times. They're asked to sign bits of paper that say, they were born a man against their will, and now they agree to be turned into women. because the outside, I should say they're kind of in an underground facility and the outside's covered in radiation, and at one point they're like, well, we'd rather live 12 days as a man up there and die rather than being changed into a woman. The women still knit, so there's guards on guard duty and they're kind of black uniforms with their visors, but they're still knitting, so it's good to see that knitting still exists in the year of 2044, which is so far in the future, can't even imagine it. It's just a wonderful, fun film. I was almost thinking about making it my favourite film of the year that I've seen so far, but it's not quite as good as Kamikaze Girls. That's still my film of 2024 so far. But it's a perfect example of not judging a book by its cover, literally, because as I said, the cover is pretty terrible, if I'm being honest. It's not the best slipcover in the world. That artwork's far better, it doesn't really explain what's going on. So, because it's Vinegar Syndrome, because of the slipcover, you kind of think it's going to be a sleazy exploitation film, but it's far from it. It's just a wonderful satire of gender politics and authoritarian rule. Obviously, they've still got sport, so they still have a variation of bizarrely American football. The word quarterback is mentioned, and of course it's the two sides, so it's RKO against genetics, and of course at the end of the game there's a traditional jersey swap, and there doesn't seem to be any bras in the year 2044, and all of a sudden Jersey Store's interested in the game with the traditional jersey swap at the end, pardon the pun. It's a lot of fun. Again, the production design perhaps looks a little bit 80s Doctor Who as well, but there's a lot of charm to it, and it's still believable in the sense of it being like a real environment. And again, I'm not going to go into spoilers, but I'm sure in the future it might be discussed like on a podcast with about the ending and how that relates to kind of everything that you've seen in the film as far as the gender politics of the film. But it's just a lot of fun. Great performances. The closing image of the film when the credits roll is pretty provocative in itself. I'm not sure how they get away with it, or how they get away with it now. Well, seeing it's one of those films with subtitles, because I think if it was an English language film, there's no way they'd get away with it. Certainly not now. But it's so enjoyable. It should put a smile on your face. And it is throwing gags at you, even if in traditional filmmaking behind the Iron Curtain, it's actually sneaking little social, political and sexual political points at you through the laughter. So that's another Vinegar Syndrome. Again, I blame Chris Mohan for all of these Vinegar Syndrome partner labels and Vinegar Syndrome releases. I'm being forced to buy by him. But this is another wonderful release. And again, I kind of passed when he mentioned it the first time, because that was just what I thought the film was going to be, but it's completely different, and it's well worth a look. So thanks very much for watching this random review of Sexmission. Please let me know if you've seen it and what you think of it, and hopefully join me again for more random reviews. This is Solitary Ronan from Solitary Ronan Films, saying farewell.